Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, I saw the comments in my last couple videos, and I understand what people are saying about the fact that safe builds are boring or uninteresting, but there's a reason why they're safe builds, and the reason why is they're tested, and they will work, they will scale, and you won't have a bad league or a bad league start. And in many cases with build guides, people will have a bad league start. If people have a bad league start, they tend to just leave the league because they deem it as no longer worth playing instead of just resetting and playing a different character. So over the past years that I've been doing these guides, I generally don't recommend playing untested skills unless there is a very clear guide or unless we've clearly stipulated it's theory crafting and there's no guarantees and you do it at your own risk. And yeah, it's just my ethics around the way that I do guide curations. But that being said, let's talk about theoretical builds and what you could play and make this really interesting because yes, there's definitely builds that you could play and there are builds that I've already built in the past that are now playable again. So let's talk about them. And off the back of what I just said, if you play these, it's on you, it's not on me, and I'm not going to give you actual guides. I'm just going to talk around the archetypes, and then you're going to have to do the research and some of the build development out of that. And bear in mind, I will be looking at a few of these for my within league builds, but my league starter, I want to be able to make some currency so then I can actually put them together so I can provide decent build guides on things. Okay, so I actually played Bleed Lacerate Gladiator when it was totally uncool back in a more ratchet form of the game. And basically it used the Jack the Val axe. Essentially what this does is it reserves a little bit of life and it gives you a pretty significant increase to bleed. Now, I didn't see any changes to this in the actual patch notes, and this particular item is really good for early bleed builds. It's not like a super optimum endgame item, but it's definitely a way to get your build cracking. The other thing that used to be played a lot in the game was the surrender, and the surrender was really popular on these builds. Now, this has actually been changed in the patch notes to be able to deal with the new adjustments to the retaliation skills. And I would probably still recommend something like this or very similar, or something that would probably be a lot tankier that would prop up your defenses a fair bit more. Now, back when I played the build, I also ran True Block as what I call max block and not glancing blows. And how I did that was to run replica reckless defenses. Now, this is a lot easier considering that they've significantly overhauled the ascendancy as well as added a whole heap of block nodes in the tree. And so you might be wondering, can we get a POB for this? Yes, I do have a POB and I'll put it in the description from my original video and an original link to the original build guide. That being said, a huge amount of things have changed in this build. This is just to give you a bit of a bearing on if you're going to take the gamble, then at least take the gamble and have a little bit of direction on where to go. This build worked really well. I cleared all T16s at the time. This was when Cyrus was big in the leagues, and that was the big bad. So it's a little behind on the DPS stats, and definitely there have been better Lacerate Bleed builds since, and I'll pull out another POB from poe.ninja that you could refer to from last league and endgame. I don't recommend this as a league starter, but if you want to do this as a league starter, there's nothing stopping you. And, you know, I really don't know where the patch notes have taken these builds moving forwards. So very likely it could very well work extremely well. But yeah, give it a shot and see what the go is. If you want to take the chance, then yeah, here's something to give you a bit of meat to chew on. Okay, so the next thing that I'm more or less theory crafting here, but I've done a similar build back in 3.10 or 3.10. This was like 4 years ago on the channel, but it was my original Reckoning max block, which you could call back then a retaliation build on the Gladiator. So basically back then you used to be able to use a combination of the Surrender, which had level 30 Reckoning, which will now have level 30 Crushing Blow, which is basically Reckoning, new version of Reckoning. Used an Abyssus, set of Face Breakers, and Ridgewald's Curse, and then basically just ramped up your defenses through the roof so that you would be able to max block. And basically, this was all the defense you needed, aside from ailment immunities and things like that. And in fact, in the game, ailment immunity wasn't really a big thing back then, outside of Bleed. Corrupted Blood wasn't even in the game, I don't think, back then. And then basically, you would use Cyclone. So this has a combination of Cyclone for mobility and scales up Impale Cyclone, and Impale Reckoning, aka in this case, Crushing Blow. and basically you just stand on enemies and they hit you and they die. And basically, yeah, that's how this build worked. So I got a bit of footage there from my old build guide from 4 years ago, and I put links as well. This was like in a very early sort of stage of when the channel was just sort of finding its feet. But yeah, no, this build potentially you could use as a template. So what I've actually done with this is I took my old tree, reported it into POB, and I have since updated it. Now, its defenses are pretty lackluster currently. I do have it on Versatile Combatant, which will be totally different for when we get the new patch, and obviously Reckoning is going to get a buff, but even in the current iteration of the game, Reckoning as it stands right now can still get with Impale and Cull up to 5.6 million DPS on hit with crit at only 38.12% crit on Facebreaker setup. This is using an Abyssus, so you are more susceptible to damage, and this should be mitigated by a lot of the Gladiator rework as well. So yeah, if you wanted to play something with Crushing Blow, you could definitely go the route with this. Alternatively, you could switch this out and use a very similar tree and go from shields to swords, and you could run the new sword skill as well, which is called Sword Storm. But yeah, in the description below, I'll put the POB that I reworked to. It's by no means a good POB. This was like from a very early iteration of the game, but it's a baseline that you could work towards if you want to use it to theory craft your build on the Gladiator. Obviously, taking into account that until the POB's updated, we won't be able to really theory craft, but if I were to theory craft this build, and wink wink nudge nudge, I probably am going to theory craft this build and resurrect it, this would be the tree that I would use to do exactly that. But yeah, that should give you some guidance on where to go with trying to get a Retaliation Crushing Blow build up and running on the Gladiator. Okay, so for the next one, I actually took my old champion tree from 3.13 and reworked it in the 3.24 league tables. And just a bit of precursor here, the Berserkers had a bit of a change as well. So it now basically means Crave the Slaughter has been changed, so it no longer provides 10 plus maximum rage or gain 1 rage. Instead, it now provides every rage. Also grants 1% increased attack speed and inherent rage loss 2 seconds later. And then basically you gain rage for every melee hit that basically you output. And Warbringer, which affects this build in particular, or this build archetype, or build, whatever you want to look at it as. Warbringer now, instead of Warcries, grant 10 rage for every 5 power if you have less than 25 rage. They now give you exerted attacks deal 50% more attack damage if a Warcry sacrificed rage recently. It now provides Warcries exert twice as many attacks. That's really interesting. Does that mean double attack? What does that mean? How does that interaction work? Anyway, that's would be a buff to what I'm going to suggest here. As if you want to play a slam build, I have put together a tree for you to play a slam build. So I played this build back when Call to Steel was a thing, and originally this was an Impale champion. And instead now, basically where I've went with this is rework the tree, the estimated DPS, and this is excluding things like Berserk off the tree, so I don't have any Berserk skill gems or anything like this. With Ground Slam of Earth Shaking, gets to about 12.4 mil, but it is 20k effective hit pool. That being said, all the gear is like ancient, like it's like totally shit gear, so you should have no issue reworking this build into a much better state. I did rework the build into a crit variant, and yeah, it doesn't use things like Determination or Grace. This was like when other defensive stats like Flesh and Stone, which is in this build funnily enough, used to be used as Blood and Sand, Flesh and Stone. So we're basically just taking a walk back to memory lane. It gets about 5,500 health, but you can push that way higher with some of the new items in the game and the new base types. But basically, yeah, this build is like super easy to level up. There's no like progenesises or anything like that. I did put a Bottled Faith on it. Obviously, this isn't a league starter curation. This isn't a league starter list, but you could take this build and potentially, if you wanted to take the risk, level it up, and you would likely get this working really easily. There's no like implicit Eldritch rolls or anything like that on any of the gear. It's like pre all of that stuff. So it should actually be pretty easy to take and really ramp up. And not to mention, the base damage on the 12.4 mil is going to go up because Ground Slam has been buffed in this case, and all slam skills have been buffed. So if you were going to like take a crack at a slam skill, this is a good sort of skeleton that you could work on. I would also say that Chieftain probably isn't a bad option to go because Chieftain's getting buffs to slam skills. So basically, or the ascendancy is getting reworked to accommodate for slam skills. So that would be a lot tankier of an option if you want to go that route. And the other thing is, if you can find a way to put endurance charges in the build, which I don't have any endurance charges in my build at current, that would also give you a ton of damage reduction as well. But yeah, anyway, I've got a POB in the description below, basically fleshed out in 3.24. I don't have any real notes around it or anything like that. It's a skeleton for you to bolt on and use and work with, but if you get it basically near or close, hopefully this sort of gets you over the line. Doesn't have a lot of chaos arrays in the build. You just need to balance that out. Resistances are capped. Everything else is looking okay, except for armor and stuff like that's a little low. But the Zerker generally has issues with survivability, so if you can ramp the DPS up higher and just make it one hit everything on the screen, then that's basically the preference with this build. Anyway, this is the third and the last one that I'll rework for now. If you guys want to see me do this more, I can do another 3. It just takes a little while to work these trees out and re-engineer builds from many, many leagues ago. Now, the other thing that you could do with slam skills is you could run the Abyssus Facebreaker Ridgewald's Curse, which I had in the last video, and you could basically stack up a huge amount of crit, max block, and run a slam skill that way, and most likely you could run like bleed slam skills on the Gladiator. Basically, the Gladiator is going to be one of the best ascendancies in the game, second to like the Juggernaut now. But yeah, anyway, those are some options for you. And yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to Swordstorm. I think that could be really awesome, and also Crushing Fist sounds like a fantastic build to me, and I definitely want to make my my Reckoning build 2.0. So that's probably going to be my second build for this league after I finish Shield Crush. But anyway, if you like this type of video, don't forget to like and sub. Don't forget to follow the channel, and don't forget to follow the Twitch. And I hope this one is creative enough for everyone. And I'll talk to you guys later.